what do I need in my career? I feel one of the biggest challenges is that, they always underestimate or, they don't tap your full potential. The system has to change. Women have to be more confident. Women have to be more strategic and put their hands up. You need to start voicing out more. Women have to start believing in themselves, taking up more opportunities.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the CyberSec Migrant, the show where we break down the world of technology, leadership, and career transitions with the best minds in the industry. Most times minds who have done the migration story. My name is Femi, and in today's episode is going to be an absolute game changer. I'm going to be spending my time. We're going to be diving into the journey of someone who's gone from engineering to recruitment. And then she's also spent a lot of time in the startup hiring landscape. And most importantly, she has a lot of ideas about how women can build, lead, and thrive in tech startups. And trust me, you don't want to miss this one. My guest today is Rekha Ramaswamy. She studied engineering, but today she does a bunch of different things, and she's the startup talent lead. She has a passion for helping women navigate tech careers with confidence, from securing systems to securing top talent. She has seen it all. So before we jump in, a quick favor to ask. If you love what we do here, make sure that you're following the show, whatever your favorite podcast platform is. And also, if you can, subscribe to our channel on YouTube. And if you find this episode interesting, do share it with someone who needs to hear that. All right, now, let's get into it. Rekha, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Femi. I'm so excited to be here today.
That's great. So first things first, let's start with your journey. Tell us a bit about yourself, your background, and without letting too much out of the bag, what made you change your trajectory?
So, hi everyone, I'm Rekha. I'm a talent partner working with startups across North America. So, I come with over 8-9 years of experience in technology recruitment. My journey started back in Singapore, where I used to work with some of the big tech. I've worked with banks, I've worked with telecoms. And slowly then I moved towards working with startups across the space, climate tech, food tech, health tech, crypto. So doing that. Yeah, it's all tech right now. So been doing that for the last 6 years, and it's always a new challenge. So I did complete my engineering back in India. I think the minute I finished my engineering, I realized, yeah, it's not for me. I wanted to do something that's more close towards, working with people, connecting with people, building relationships. And I went and I pursued my MBA in HR in Singapore. And from there, I've not looked back.
There we go. So such an interesting shift. So you started out as an engineer and then moved into HR and now an MBA. And then now you're doing HR, headhunting, talent recruitment, and working in the startup industry. That is a whole lot of experiences for someone. Just thinking about it, as a woman, this is International Women's Month, so there's a lot of activity this month. But as a woman navigating both tech and recruitment, throughout that journey of making those changes, what are those challenges you faced along the way to get to where you are today?
Yeah, wonderful question, because it made me, it's making me think about my journey. Having worked, say, across Singapore, Singapore, APAC generally, and working with Europe, companies in Europe, States, and now Canada, I feel one of the biggest challenges that I have been facing across any of these tech firms broadly is that, they always underestimate or, they don't tap your full potential. Often there were meetings where, my ideas were overlooked and someone else will repeat it and they'll be like, what a great idea.
Yeah, I know how that feels.
Yeah, and trivializing my achievements. You did this, okay, but the same achievement someone else does, they get like celebrated, they be put on a pedestal. I initially, in my first few years, I thought this is how the corporate world would be. I thought this is the status quo, and I have to just play along to survive it. But I was so unhappy. I wanted to do something where I just don't want to survive. I want to like be happy and thrive in it. So I started speaking. I started voicing up. I started saying like, hey, I've been doing this. And I started taking up more opportunities, taking up more responsibilities, which would give me growth, but also visibility across the leadership team. And this was like a game changer.
That's interesting. Again, I like how you said that it took you to start to decide to speak out and talk about, I don't want to just accept the status quo. And I know that a lot of women hesitate to pivot in their careers, or even speak out, even when they know that they can do this thing, even when they know they can take on that challenge. but they still hesitate. So what would be your advice for women who are thinking like that, that how can I make a bold career move with confidence?
Yeah, so for me, what was driving me or motivating me throughout my journey, starting working with, the big tech companies like say
Mm-hmm.
Meta and Uber and Foodpanda, and then starting to work with startups. But one thing that has always been driving me is looking for continuous development, continuous learning. And I think that is so important for everyone in the current scenario. Tech, non-tech, I think everyone needs to always be learning because tech, the innovation is on rapid space, right? And one thing that helped me gain clarity is that understanding my why and my what. What do I need in my career? Do I need more flexibility? Do I need leadership? Do I need to manage a team? So identifying what I want from my career and not just following a job description that the company gives. So the what really helped me, and along with the what, also why do I need this? For some people it would be just doing a 9 to 5 job, and it is great. You need to you need to satisfy what you want, but combining with the why I want to do this, because I want to grow more, I want to get more accomplishments. So the what and why was very important for me to identify. So that's why if you see my journey, I was like, yeah, I want to move towards startups because I want to be able to give more value add to the teams. I want to be more strategic in my involvement in growth. So that really helped me. So for anyone who's making a career change, I would ask them to introspect first, find their what, their why, and build their career from there.
Fantastic. So let's change tack and talk about that for a bit. You've worked with startups, and what do you see as a difference in the way startups build teams compared to the way established organizations, the Metas and the Ubers build their teams? What's the difference?
So with startups and big on organization, the whole way they approach a hiring is very different, or whole way they grow is very different. With startups, they're generally more flexible. You have more opportunity for growth, and they don't have like a lot of structured hiring process. They are like, okay, I want this, they go for it. But with you see any of these tech big giants, it's very structured process. And often it's a lot more complex. You would be like a software development in one business unit, and there would be like some 100 business units like that. But in a startup, you would be a same software developer, but you would be building like multiple products and solutions within that unit, right? So the whole way how they build their team structure, like startups will have very lean teams, big techs will have like so many big teams, and you would be one of the many in it. There's also advantages both sides, right? With big tech companies, generally it's more structured, it's a multi-stage hiring, it's more standardized. It's not like they won't change the process for one person. But with startup, it's all over the place. Very few startups are more strategic and intentional. And what is also a reason, with startups is they're not very focused on, say, having a diverse team. Just today, I was seeing a Series A startup. The whole team was not at all diverse. And how do they hire? They hire someone like through a referral, or, they hire like a friend's friend. So that kind of culture, it's not structured at all. And that way it's not always diverse until the founding team is very intentional about building a diverse team. They're generally very, very relaxed and much more chill in the startup environment. Another key different, I would say, is especially in startup is, your budgets are very different. Your the way it's not necessarily just a technical alignment. You have to align with the vision of the company, the mission, the culture fit is more important. But in a big tech company, it's also more stable. So you also get better competitive salaries. The employer branding matters more. So I would say these are like my top few differences I see with startups and big techs.
Okay, so startups generally, yes, like you rightly said, they tend to struggle with hiring. What would you say are some of the biggest mistakes you've actually seen startups make around hiring, and how can they avoid those mistakes when it happens, or stop it from happening, if you will?
Yeah, like I previously mentioned, the bias, the unconscious bias hiring happens a lot more in startup because
Hmm.
we have like affinity bias, we have like halo effect. I was just talking to a founder last week and they said they're expanding their team, and they've got two people because they're friends of friends and they're interested. So it's so easy to go within your own network and your own cycle of people, and you're like, yeah, I'm just going to hire people who I like to work with. Startups are not very intentional in building diverse teams. I don't want to generalize, but it's just more easier when they, only when they become like a series B, they're like more strategic and intentional. But when they are like in a series A or like in a seed, especially, they're like more focused on building the right team. So the diversity and the quotient is always missing. And they are also very focused in, hiring the best person, the technically strong one, and things like that, to the point that, there's no cultural alignment sometimes, because
Yeah.
they're so focused on, I want this person with this skill set because they're going to grow the team and everything. They forget like the cultural alignment. And what does this lead to? The long term strategy, the retention, all of that is always missing out.
Yeah,
So
true,
yeah.
true. Yeah. I know startups generally tend to be very agile, but sometimes that agility they have is also the bane that they have, because then you find, because you're trying to bring somebody who is your friend or a friend's friend, or you trust them, or want to get one person to wear 7 different hats, which is
Yes.
all fine and good in the startup world, but it's not always the most productive use of people's time and talents. That's true. But there's something you said when you were speaking, you spoke about diversity. And that's something that we're aware of, especially in this part of the world where we are, and not with the current political situation we have right now. So, what can startups do to create truly inclusive hiring practices beyond just checking a box? Oh, is he black? Yes. Is he Aboriginal? Yes. Is she a woman? All of that. What can they do to actually be really and truly inclusive and diverse?
I think the first step for any company that wants to build a more diverse team is to have like clear goals, like what they want to go and plan ahead for it. Because hiring always is not the most long-term strategy they look at. They look at it more like short-term. So I feel it is important the switch has to be like, instead of reactive, it has to be more proactive. So especially for DEI, it has to be a proactive goal. The education of why DEI is important, the education of the affinity bias or halo effect, the unconscious bias that happens, why it is okay to have your friends working and all of that, but it's also important to expand your talent pools.
Mm,
Just
mm.
not LinkedIn, but going beyond the traditional methods, being out there and having a diverse set of interview panels. Just have more than two people, more than three people of different diverse backgrounds, because that would give more comfort for the candidates who are being interviewed. And the last point I would say is like having strong metrics, because they say data is the new diamond or new oil, right? And it is how
Yeah.
it is. And I feel everywhere there has data. Like you need to track your hiring data, you need to track your diversity quotient, you need to track all this data and see where we're missing, where we have to grow. So having that kind of strategic approach with data is very important even for hiring.
That's so true. Hey, CyberSec Migrant listeners. If you're enjoying the show, help us spread the word. Share the CyberSec Migrant podcast with your friends, your colleagues, and your network. It's the best way to help others discover our awesome content and to join the conversation. And don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast platform. We're available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and any other place where you get your podcast, so you never miss an episode. And do hit that like and subscribe button on YouTube. Your support helps us keep bringing you more valuable content, insights, and stories, and all these tips from the world of cybersecurity. And thank you for tuning in. And now, let's get back to today's episode. I'm going to change tack in a minute, but just staying a little bit around startups and particularly women. In your experience, what have you seen is the percentage of women who choose to go down the startup route versus people who are not women? Do you tend to see a lot more women going down the startup route or being founders compared to men?
God, hardly any is how I feel. Every time I go for like a pitch event or I go for any of the startup events that happen, there's like hardly any completely women founders. You Even leadership, leave alone startups, like leadership, women leaders, they say
Yeah.
only 25%, the stats says like only 25% people are women leaders. And in that 5% is the women of color.
Yeah. Yeah,
So
5%
we
of
are like,
25%. So it's not 5% of the whole. Exactly,
yeah,
which is so small.
exact. And with all these companies being more like we need more masculine energy, I'm like, we're already at we are already at 5%. Do you want us to just not participate in the table? So I think there's hardly any, in my opinion. And even who are there tend to like burn out fast and leave. So it's very important that we start like pushing more, diverse set of founders, I would say.
Yeah. And that's the thing, like you rightly pointed out. Many women don't see themselves as founders, even when they have the skills and the experience. Why do you think that is? And what can we do to change that narrative? And how can we be allies and help us to that cause as well?
I mean, the system has to change. Women have to be more confident. Women have to be more strategic and put their hands up. You need to start voicing out more. At the same time, we need the society also to be more welcoming, more
Yeah.
supportive for women, right? The biggest challenge is the limited access to networks and funding. There's very limited access to women. And I was just reading a stat last week. Women founded startups receive less than 3% of the venture capital funding. So
Only
it's not like
3%.
it's not like we get a lot first and then it's more limited. And also, we come in a society where we are so stereotyped. Women, the traditional gender roles are so strong. It's always like, yeah, you can be a founder, but you have to come back home and be a caretaker. You need to be a provider. So it is difficult to balance it all. So I think having more VCs and more support, more networking and mentorship groups for women, especially for women in positions of power, is very important. And I think it is educating the investors, educating the networks, educating everyone to say why this is important. Because the more we start having more diverse people in the startup field, there will be better solutions for everyone. So I
Yeah.
think decision makers have to be more understanding of the market for women. And I think the common topic that I keep telling in all my answers is going to be the unconscious bias, but that happens even with founders.
Yeah. Yeah.
It happens in hiring, it happens in VCs, it happens everywhere. I think it's multiple ways. Women have to start believing in themselves, taking up more opportunities. The communities have to be more supportive, and we need to start educating VCs and investors as well.
That's so true. I did a recent episode. I spoke to two of my colleagues. Well, both of them are immigrants as well. And one of the things that came up was conversations around how sometimes if you're a woman, they assume that because you're a woman, you shouldn't do certain things or shouldn't say certain things. I'll leave a link to that episode up here. But it's something that generally I realize that the challenges aren't just a little. There's quite a lot of challenges that women face to be able to actually even articulate that. Yes, we can fix some of that by learning, but some of them require a mindset shift. So what mindset shift do you think is necessary for women to be able to step into leadership roles with confidence? Because like you rightly said, we don't see a lot of them in that space.
Yeah, I think owning their value, have to become your own cheerleader. You have to know what you bring to the table and be vocal about it. Because if you are not going to push for yourself, no one will. So I
True,
think the
true,
first thing is
true.
owning their value. And we often have the imposter syndrome. I think breaking down and being more intentional about your approach is very, very important. We can't be put in a box, right? So going beyond that is very, very important. And I know this could be difficult or challenging, but we have to break down these unconscious bias, whether in hiring or
Mm,
whether with investors. I think women leaders have to support and be a beacon for others so that there are more people in their
yeah,
team that are coming from a diverse background. So once you rise up to a level, be the beacon so you support other people.
yeah, exactly. I remember growing up in Nigeria, we had this thing. It was jokingly called the PhD syndrome. PhD mean pull him down. So once you see somebody that looks like you going up there, you're like, nope, that's not me. I'm going to pull that person down. And I think we need to change that mindset that we shouldn't do that. We should support. There's also another proverb where I come from, and Nigerians like to say a lot of proverbs. They say, if I'm in the market square and I see somebody dancing and celebrating, I will clap for them so that next time when I'm celebrating, people can clap for me and dance with me as well. So we need to share
Exactly.
that. Yeah. Now, I know you said the stat shows that there are not so many women-led startups that are doing things, but I would love to ask, do you know any women-led startups that are really shaking things up in the industry? Because I would love to hear about them and support them in any way. So can you think of any standout examples of women-led startups?
Yeah, I've worked with quite a bit of them as well, and I am a huge supporter, and I'm like the biggest cheerleader. So when I work with startups, I'm also looking at impact-driven startups and startups that are led by women. So I'm going to list out a couple of my favorites across the globe to some of the local startups as well. One of my key favorites that I've read and listened their journey a lot is Canva. So Canva, one of the co-founders of Canva is a
Yeah.
woman and she's amazing. And like that, we have amazing startups even in Vancouver, even in BC that are amazing. So just last week, I met a co-founder and I just recently posted about her as well on LinkedIn. So give it a check. So she has been in this entrepreneurial journey for 15 years and she has this company called Social Nature. Her first startup was already bought over, and this is like her third entrepreneurial spirit. And she's amazing. It is impact driven, it is growing actively. And there are so many more like that. There's also Planet Forward, the founder of Planet Forward back in US. I think she's also like a serial entrepreneur. So there are so many of these women. So I'm happy to link their names and everything later
Yeah,
so
sure,
people can
absolutely.
check. So we have our own VC leaders like Moment Energy has amazing women founders, Tiny Go Studios. So there's so many that's there, that's growing, that's upcoming.
Yeah.
It's just that more light, like how you said, we need to start celebrating them.
Yeah, that's true. One of the things I like to recommend, especially for those who are in the cybersecurity industry, is WISIS, and She Leads Tech, because they they have made it their mission to help women, particularly in cybersecurity and in tech, because representation for women in cybersecurity and in technology is pretty low. It's not anywhere near that. It's beginning to change, but we think there's still room for more. So, for any woman who is listening, if you're considering a career in tech or as a startup, don't get discouraged. Don't think that you can't do that, because actually there's people who are doing that. There's people you can look up to and that can actually motivate you to get into your own stride and start your own journey. So for people who are thinking along those lines, where should they start? What can they do? How can you help them?
Yes, absolutely. I think my first is like linking to the previous question that I mentioned, finding your why and what is going to be very important. Once you identify that, I feel you can build you can build your work around your career. So if you want to move into startups, identify what startup, what do you actually want to do. And I can't tell how beneficial, how important is networking. So being very intentional and strategic in your networking, not going for every other event, but going for events that you feel would add value to you so that you don't feel drained attending all these events, right? And supporting, finding your system. I feel for all these women who have been thriving and building, they have like such a strong support system, like a strong work environment. Build that connection. Start building your mentorship, your volunteer groups, your work environment that is going to be your rock solid support. And like me, when I started by myself, I'm like starting small. I'm going to test how this is, and I'm going to once it works out, I'm going
Scale.
to reiterate. Yeah. So start small, test it out, scale. And it's going to be very important that we start putting our intentions and actions in one place so that it is more beneficial for growth. So I think these are my points. First would be find your why. Second would be network. Third would be build your supportive work environment, build your rock solid support. Fourth would be mentorship and like find mentors, be a mentor, do the whole in and out of it. And the last would be start small, test, scale.
I don't think there can be any better advice than that. Now, let me put you on the spot. If you could go back in time, what is the one piece of career advice you wish you had received earlier that could have made a difference for you?
Yeah, I this is a good one because there's so much that I would go and say like do this, don't do this, take this job, don't take this job and stuff. But I think the one right advice is finding your tribe, finding your network,
Yeah.
because with the right people around, whether your colleagues or whether your mentors, you can grow or you can stagnate. So there have been years that I stagnated in my career journey as well. But once I found the right tribe, group of people, it was just growth from there. And that's why I'm here right now. My experience working with my startup back in Singapore and then eventually in Canada gave me the confidence to go independent. So it's very, very important to be with the right tribe. So I would say, I wish I had known that earlier, so I would have been very intentional about it.
True.
Not just look at job descriptions and, oh, is this role matching me? But is this role beneficial for my growth?
That's true. That's very important. And I think the earlier you're able to actually find your why, like you rightly said, the quicker you can actually hit your stride, and hit your target. Make it to the stars if that's your target. So again, I said earlier, I know that you help people who are thinking of startups set their own. If someone's listening and they want to connect with you for mentorship advice, career advice, how do I start my startup? Where can they find you?
I'm very active on LinkedIn. I share a lot of stories on LinkedIn. I wake up to LinkedIn, I sleep to LinkedIn.
I know the life.
Yeah, so LinkedIn is the best place. They could reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I'm also happy to share my email with them when there's a connection. So LinkedIn would be the great place to start, and from there we can build the relationship.
Fantastic. So what I'm going to do is, like Rekha's rightly said, I'm going to put a link down in the description below so you can find her LinkedIn page. I'll put her email address as well if you're open to that. And then you can reach out to her, ask for advice, and just mention to her that you heard her on the CyberSec Migrant, and I'm sure she'll give you fantastic service. It's been a very insightful conversation today, and a big thank you to Rekha for sharing her journey, her wisdom, game-changing advice, like I said, and I'm sure she's open to helping. So check out the link in the description below. She's on LinkedIn, or reach out on LinkedIn, connect with her, and you can be sure that she's going to give you the best of her expertise. Any final words?
Reach for the stars, and of course, always believe in yourself, because if you don't, no one else will.
Exactly. If you don't believe in yourself, no one else will. So always do that. Always blow your own trumpet. If you found value in today's episode, do me a favor. Follow this show on your favorite podcast platform. And if you're watching this on YouTube, subscribe to our YouTube channel. And if you know someone who will benefit from this, a woman founder, a woman leader, share it with your network. Let us get more women into leadership roles in tech. Let's keep this conversation going. So if you're on Spotify, respond to the attached poll. And if you're on all other platforms, feel free to leave a comment, including on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, and wherever you're listening to this. Leave us a comment with your biggest takeaway from today's discussion. I would love to hear from you, and so would the rest of our audience. Thank you for tuning in to this episode, and thank you so much to Rekha for coming on to tell us all about women startups and how you can actually do that. Until next time, this is Femi signing out on the CyberSec Migrant. Thank you.
Thank you.